Hi, my name's Scott Collard and I'm the chef at Colorado Street Cafe. Welcome to Austin Cooks. Today I thought I'd discuss sauces with everybody. It seems to be the biggest question I get when I start talking to people about cooking and so forth. And you know, they're always the questions they ask me about what I do for a living and whatnot. It always seems to fascinate them that I do sauces, and they really aren't that complicated. So I thought that I would demonstrate them for you today and go over them with you and show you just how easy they really are and that they really aren't that complicated. So the first thing I'm going to do is discuss the basics of sauces, which are stocks. Now there's basically four kinds of stock. There's a beef stock, with which we use beef bones. There's a fish stock, with which you use fish scraps or even a whole piece of fish if you'd like. There's chicken stock, and there's vegetable stocks. The vegetarians tend to like the vegetable stocks, which is you would use greens and onions and tomatoes and all your different vegetables. Now the important thing about a stock to remember is it's just flavored water. That's all you're trying to do, is to bring some of the flavor out of the food into the water. So what you do to do that is you always start with cold water. It's very important. Instead of, when you blanch vegetables or you want to keep the flavor in the vegetables, you use a boiling water and it retains the flavor in the vegetables. But when you start with cold water and you heat it slowly, it brings the flavor out of the vegetables and the seasonings and brings it into the water. And then you can strain the water off and use it to make your sauces. The two main things to sauces are consistency and seasoning. That's really all it is. It's how thick it is and how it tastes, and you've got a sauce. So the first thing I've done is I've made some stocks to bring down to show you all. Let me start here first. We have this is a fish stock. As you can see, it looks clear, a little cloudy. If you could smell it, it's got a very fishy smell to it. Now over here on the back burner, we've got a chicken stock. It's the same thing. It's a clear stock. I've already strained all the bones and what they call the banquet garni, or the seasonings, out of it. And now I've got the water and I'm ready to work with it. Now, with the beef stock, I've already thickened it and I've made a brown sauce, or an Espanol sauce. It's brown in color and it has consistency. It has texture to it. If you hold it on your finger, it sticks to your finger. Okay, so once you get your stocks all made and you get a nice flavorful water, the next step is to figure out how to get your consistency, how to thicken it up and get the product that you want out of it. Now one of the ways most people do it at home is they'll take flour and water and mix them together, make kind of a paste, and work with it that way. Well, that works fine for cornstarch. If you're going to use cornstarch to thicken your sauces, that's how you should do it. Kind of mix it with water, make a whitewash, and then slowly add that to your sauce. But when you're going to use flour, it's best to make what's called a roux. And what that is where you take either the chicken fat or whatever kind of fat you would have off the top of the stock and mix it in with the flour. Make sure you get as little water as possible, because that'll make it separate on you or not work properly. The other thing you can use is oil, especially if you're going to do Cajun cooking, where you're going to really be cooking the roux a lot and making a brown roux or a black roux. Then you want to use oil. For most practical purposes, margarine is your best bet. Your mix ratio is approximately 1 part to 1 part. You want to use, if you use a 1/4 pound of margarine, the equal amount of flour, volume-wise, not weight-wise. You want to get something of this consistency. If you make your roux too thick or too tight, when it goes to glutenized, which is the whole thickening effect, you're going to end up with a sauce that's going to want to break. Because what's going to happen is that flour is going to want to expand and grab onto everything and turn it into a paste, and it's going to separate on you because it just has no place to go because the roux is so thick. So you want to get something at about this consistency, maybe a little thicker. I think I'll add a little more flour to this to thicken it up a little bit. It's not there's no science to how thick to make the roux. You want kind of a paste type material. It's not a situation where you've got to get out the measuring cups and make sure it's just right, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, now don't use butter when you make a roux. Like I say, it's got too many impurities in it. It's got too much water and salt and fats, and when you go to try to use it with your margarine, or I mean with your flour, it's going to separate on you. Okay, now that we've got that down, we're going to go to thickening the sauces. I've got my stocks here, and the first one I'm going to start with is a chicken stock. That's the most versatile stock. It's the one that you're going to get the most miles out of. Now, the glutenizing effect that I was talking about, let's see if I can get a flame here. I got one over here, we'll just use that. Okay, the glutenizing effect that I was speaking of, it happens when the sauce simmers. And this is a problem people have at home, is they go and they start throwing the flour in the sauce and it doesn't thicken up and they keep throwing it in and throwing it in. All of a sudden the sauce comes to a simmer and it turns to paste. They've thrown so much flour in there. So it's important to know that you need to have the sauce at a simmer. Not necessarily a rolling boil, because when the sauce gets too hot it can separate. So that's a very important thing, is the temperature of the sauce. You want it to be at a simmer but not a boil, and you'll get away with it fine. Okay, once you get your sauce simmering, which this is, I've already had it on the stove for a little while, you want to slowly add your roux. Take small batches, put them in, mix them in well. Use a whisk, not a spoon. You'll end up with less lumps. Slowly add it. This is already starting to thicken up a little bit. Now, even when you do get a chicken stock made, you're going to want to add seasonings to it rather than work with just the water. You want to add, depending on what kind of sauce you're going to make, you at least want to add salt and pepper. Like I say, chicken bouillon cubes work real well. And there we go. This is already thickening up quite a bit. I'm making a pretty tight sauce, or thick if you will, because I'm going to add a lot of things to it at various stages to show you how you can take this one base sauce and turn it into several different sauces. Okay, let me pull this over here and show it to y'all. There we go. Well, this is just, if you want to get technical about it, this would be called a chicken velouté sauce. It's nothing but thickened chicken stock. You can see you've got the consistency there. When you put your finger into it, it'll hold to your finger. It doesn't just run off. That's what you want. Okay, now one of the most common sauces is a white sauce or a bechamel. Now, a lot of people use just milk to do that, but you really don't get that good of a flavor. You really want to use a 50-50 milk or cream and your stock. Thicken that up and you'll get a much better product out of it than using just straight milk. Even if you just cut the milk with water and thicken it up and add the bouillon cubes, you're going to be a lot better off and a lot happier with the product as opposed to just thickening up straight milk. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is turn this into a cream sauce or a bechamel by adding some heavy cream. Now obviously you're not going to want to cook in these quantities at home, but since I am going to do so many different sauces, I'm going to make quite a bit. Now, slowly add your cream to your sauce anytime you cream a sauce, and mix it in. That way, if you add it too quickly, it'll hit the sauce too fast and your sauce will separate. That's always a danger with any sauce, is it'll break. But if you just take some simple steps and precautions, you won't ever have that problem. Okay, so now we've got a bechamel sauce, or close to it. You see now? Looks like you could already pour it over your chicken or fish or whatever you want to do with it. Okay, now the first sauce I'm going to make that I've got this base sauce made is a Mornay sauce. It's one of the simpler sauces. It's simply a cheese sauce, actually. So what I'll do, I'll use this pot here, and I'll take some of my sauce here and pour it on in. Okay. Bring it over here. Now I brought lots of ingredients here to make all these various sauces. One of the key ingredients to a bechamel sauce is nutmeg. It doesn't take a lot for a quart of bechamel, you probably want a teaspoon of nutmeg. But it really seems to help out the flavor. Nutmeg is one of those ingredients that a little bit really goes a long way. Okay, now what we want to do is make a Mornay, or a cheese sauce. The French always think of great names for pretty simple sauces. I've got some grated Swiss cheese and Jack cheese here. White cheese is generally the cheese you want to use for a Mornay sauce, but you can also make a cheddar sauce with this same technique, just using cheddar cheese. The important thing is to have your cheese grated. You don't want to use chunks of cheese or anything like that. I guess in a fondue you would, but not when you're trying to add cheese to sauces. It's important to have them grated. Slowly add them. Don't chunk them all in at once. You see they slowly blend into the sauce. Should be a real good sauce when we get done with it. Swiss cheese, Gruyere, baby Swiss, Jack cheese, mozzarella, Havarti works real good. Any of the white cheeses make a great Mornay sauce. As far as how much cheese to use, my best advice there would be to just taste it as you go. If you're using a stronger cheese, you're probably going to want to use less cheese. If you're using a mozzarella or a Jack, you're going to want to use quite a bit of cheese. Okay. And the final touch on this Mornay sauce that I like, and as far as whether it's classic cuisine or not, I'm not really sure, is to add some sherry to it. I brought along quite a few wines today, but this one is sherry. And let's see, what have I got? About a quart of sauce here. I'm going to want to add about a half cup of sherry. And the nice thing about sauce is there's really no precise measurements. You don't have to make sure you've got a cup or half cup. Once you get the feel for them, you can kind of wing it, and they're going to come out just fine. You might make a mistake once or twice and find out you like it better. Okay, so that's a Mornay sauce. You make a basic white sauce. You add nutmeg and cheese, grated cheese, slowly. And then you add some sherry, and you want to cook it down a little bit to kind of get that alcohol flavor out of it. Works great with pasta. You can throw vegetables in here. You can mushrooms, green onions, anything with this. What I'm showing you today are basic sauces that you can do any kind of innovation with that you want to do. The limitations are not. There's just none. Okay, so that's the Mornay sauce. Let's go to a Dijon sauce or a Dijon sauce. It's an excellent sauce. It works well with veal, chicken, meat, anything. I'm going to just go ahead and put this one in a little container I've got down here. Okay, take your same basic white sauce. Pour it on in your pot there. In the restaurants, what we do, we make up huge batches of these white sauces, and then we do just what I'm doing here, make several variations from the one sauce. You can do the same thing at home. Okay, you get that. Let's see, Dijon. Now, as with the one sauce, the big thing to add was nutmeg. With this sauce, it's tarragon. Seems to really help the flavor. So you just take some tarragon leaves. For a quart of sauce, I'd say use a tablespoon. Put them on in there. And then get that going. Add your Dijon mustard. Let's see if I can get a spoon here. Take a spoon like so. I'd say that's about a tablespoon. For a quart of sauce, I'm going to use 3 tablespoons because I like it pretty Dijon-y. But you can season it to your taste. Okay. Now instead of sherry for the Dijon sauce, what seems to work the best is white wine. The drier the better. And once again, I'd say for a quart of sauce, you want to use a half cup. And if at some point you add too many liquids and your sauce tends to get too thin on you, just turn up the heat again and add a little more roux to it, and it'll thicken right back up. This is a Dijon sauce. It's kind of pale yellow in color. Looks real nice with the tarragon floating around in it. Excellent with fish, chicken, veal. Next sauce we're going to make is going to be a Florentine sauce, a spinach cheese sauce. Basically, you can take the same Mornay sauce that we made and add sauteed mushrooms, onions, and spinach to it, and you've got your spinach Florentine sauce. Now, what I've got here is the Mornay already made that we used before. It's got the nutmeg and the sherry in it. I'm going to take spinach leaves, drop them on into it. You can use frozen spinach too, it works fine. Since I'm using fresh spinach, it's going to take quite a bit because it really does cook down a lot. Now, one of the things that works well with this particular sauce is Parmesan cheese as opposed to the Swiss cheese. Just mix it up like that. Pretty soon your spinach will wilt down. Saute some mushrooms, throw it in there. That you can see how basic sauces really are. You kind of start with one central sauce and you can do several variations with it. With this particular white sauce, I would imagine you could make 20 different sauces easy. You can also get real creative. Almost any spice in the kitchen can go in it. You can do anything from thyme, oregano, any kind of wine, to make any variation that you're interested in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and let those mushrooms cook. We'll add it to the Florentine sauce when they're sauteed, season it up with some salt and pepper, and you're all set. You've got a wonderful Florentine sauce. Goes excellent. One of the best ways to use it, I think, is to, say you poach a piece of fish or chicken or broil it, however you cook it. Put the Florentine sauce on a plate, lay it out, and then stick your meat, be it fish or chicken or whatever, on top of it. Sprinkle cheese on top of that. Throw it into the oven for a second to melt the cheese, and it's an excellent looking plate. This is a trick you ought to try at home. Saw a chef one time, he was in there doing this, and he had a huge skillet about this big full of eggs. And it got too hot and it burned him, and he let it go and the eggs went all over the floor. That's good, lightly sauteed. Whoops, get my spoon out of there. Throw them on into the sauce. Mix it up. There you go, nice Florentine sauce. Okay. Alright, well that's enough with the white sauces. Now all these are made with chicken sauce, chicken stock, a basic chicken velouté, bechamel type sauce, and you can do all these variations with it. Next stock we're going to work with is going to be a fish stock. Looks much like the chicken stock. It's clear in color, not very dark. Made with what is called a court bouillon. The way you make this stock is you take your fish scraps, start with cold water always, don't ever start with hot water. Put it in a pot, add some lemon, some white wine, some peppercorns. Parsley works real well. That's when you take the peppercorns and the parsley, and people use thyme, throw that all into a cheesecloth. They call that a banquet garni. But one of the best ways that I find to use it is just to throw it all right into the sauce, don't mess with the cheese sauce, and then strain it all out when you're done. Okay, get this up to simmer. Going to thicken it up much like we did the other sauces. Like I say, that's all there is to sauces, is consistency and the flavor. Once you get those two down, you're there. And grab our roux again. It's a nice thing about a roux, if you're going to use it, you can make up a big batch and just keep it around the house. You know, keep it in the fridge, take it out, pop it in the microwave, or put it on the stove for a second, you're ready to go, and you got it all over again. Alright, slowly add it, whip it on in. The sauce we're going to make here is going to be a Newburgh sauce. It's a cream sherry sauce, kind of pink in color. Great for seafood. One of the big entrees in our restaurant that we do is a seafood Newburg. I make it just like this. I make the sauce, and then I saute shrimp and green onions and mushrooms and various fish that we have, and I'll throw it all into this stuff. Serve it over rice. Sells great. People love it. Okay. While I'm waiting for this to thicken up, I wanted to talk about equipment a little bit. I'm always amazed at people when I go to their houses and they've got these little bitty whips and they've got these real thin pots and stuff. I want to emphasize to people that you don't have to go to the department stores and buy your equipment. You can go to the restaurant supplies. They're happy to sell retail, and you get the same equipment that the restaurants work with. It's much better quality. It'll last a lot longer. You don't have to work with your little wire whips, that are about this long. You can get a nice big one. You can get pots that are good and thick, and you'll find the prices are a lot better too. Give you an idea, when you go into a small store, you get a spatula about this size. Well, that works okay, but there's a whole lot of times where you want a spatula about this size. Well, they just don't sell them in the department stores, but you can sure find them at the restaurant supplies. So I would certainly advise everybody to go out there and walk through one. They're really interesting just to even cruise through. Okay, this is going here. Nice and thick. Okay, we're going to make this sauce a little thicker just by adding more roux to it. Because we're essentially thinking that we're going to hold seafood or something like that in here. This is the sauce. Okay, now so far all we've got is a fish stock that's thick. We're going to turn our fire down. Now if you have a problem with scorching sauces, a lot of people have a real problem, especially with the cream sauces. All you have to do is to remember to keep them on a low fire. And then when you're going to be right here working with them and you're going to be standing over them, turn them up on high. That's fine, as long as you're stirring them. But if you're going to walk away and cut something up, you're going to do something else, just turn the fire down on low and you're going to find that you won't scorch near as many sauces. Okay, that's going. We're going to add all the essential things to this particular sauce, one of which is sherry. Now we've got about a quart of sauce here again, and I'm going to add about a half cup of sherry. Okay. The other spices you use with this are paprika, a little garlic. Paprika gives it a nice color. If you happen to get the Hungarian paprika, it'll give it some good flavor too. Garlic, we're going to use about a teaspoon of garlic, and we used about a tablespoon of the paprika. Mix that on in there. See how dramatically the color of the sauce changes. That's how you get that Newburg color. If you ever go out to the restaurants and eat the seafood Newburg, it's always got a reddish, orangish color to it. Okay, the other things I'm going to add, just out of personal preference, I'm going to add a little bit of dill to it. I think almost all the seafood sauces taste better with dill. Okay, now I've reserved some of the stock, the fish stock, because I've gotten the sauce a little thick. So I'm just going to add a little more stock to it. If I didn't have the stock, I could use cream or water. Either one works great. Just if you get your sauce too thin, if you find that you've used too much roux, just add more water. Okay, now we're going to cream it out. I like to use heavy cream, but half and half or milk will work. And slowly add that to it. Cream it out a little bit. Doesn't take much. Okay, and there you've got a nice Newburg sauce. You've got your consistency, and I can assure you the flavor's there. Okay, let's work with the brown sauce now. Show you some variations on it. Now, I've already added the roux to this, and I did boil some bones and use some pan drippings, but I also used some bouillon cubes, so it smells just like gravy. Now, if you want to know the difference between gravies and sauces, why do they call one gravy and one a sauce? A gravy traditionally is made with pan drippings. That's what makes a gravy. A sauce is made from a stock, and that's what makes a sauce. Okay, all ready to go here. Now this one I'm going to make is going to be a mushroom Marsala sauce. Marsala is a wine, and there's a sauce called the Marsala sauce because it gives such an excellent flavor to a brown sauce. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of butter into my sauce here so I can saute my mushrooms and green onions. There goes that. Whoops. About to lose it there. Okay. Where am I green? Okay, here we go. This is a mixture of bell peppers. Pull it out here so you can see it. Bell peppers, red and green. I've got some green onions and some mushrooms. It's going to make a real nice colorful sauce by putting those bell peppers in there. Put this on the fire. I use a high fire to saute with. Something to work it with here. Okay, get that all sauteed up there. Once it starts to get cooked, say about a minute or two, I want to take Marsala wine. It's kind of a sweet wine. Add that on in there. If you really want to have some fun, you can put it in a short dish pan, much like a saute pan, something similar to this here, and you get the fire up real high and you kind of tilt it to one side, you can get a nice flame going. Impress everybody. But you really don't need to do that. Okay, get that going. Now you add your brown sauce. Pour it right on in there. Mix it up. Let this simmer for 20-30 minutes. Get that flavor in there real good. That Marsala wine flavor is what you're going for. Now this is a quart of sauce, and I probably used 1.5 cups of Marsala because you really want to get that flavor into it. You see, it's a pretty looking sauce. It's got good color to it. It's got an excellent flavor. This is great for if you want to bread a chicken breast and cook it on your in a pan fry it, and then put this sauce over it, or beef. It's great with steaks and so forth. It's excellent sauce. Almost all these sauces I'm showing you can be used with various types of food. Even the Newburgh sauce is excellent with chicken. Okay, next sauce. I'm going to show you a Cajun sauce. Now all I've done, I'm going to take the brown sauce that I've got here. Dump another one of these. Okay, you take the brown sauce that you've got made by thickening your stock and seasoning it up with salt and pepper and beef bouillon cubes I assume you're going to use at home. Hopefully it'd be nice if you could find these nice bases that I have over here commercially in the retail stores, in the grocery stores and so forth. But I haven't seen them so far. Okay, so I get the brown sauce on. Now what I've done is I've made a mixture, a seasoning mixture of gumbo filet, cayenne pepper, comino, and chili powder. And it's about, each one of those is about a 1-part mix. In other words, if you want to make a big batch, you take a cup of each one. If you want to make a little batch, take a tablespoon of each sauce. Okay, I'm just going to dump that right on in there. This is a quart of sauce, and I've probably got, a 1/4 cup of seasoning in it. Okay, let me show this to you. It doesn't look much different than just the original brown sauce. But if you taste it, it's got a good spicy flavor. Good for Cajun food. Goes great. Has a red color, much like a kind of a gumbo. Be very good over chicken with rice and maybe a little okra and tomato on the side, something like that. Okay, the next sauce I want to cover is hollandaise. It seems to be the most popular sauce. It's when everybody says, "Oh, how do you make hollandaise?" So I'm going to go through it with everybody, and maybe you'll get the picture here. Okay, the first thing you do is I've got 6 egg yolks here. Now you have to separate the eggs. You don't want the whites. They'll mess up the sauce for you. Won't make it work quite right. So you take your egg yolks, you mix them up. You want to use a metal bowl with a lot of room in it so that you can really work the eggs around so they don't You know, you don't want scrambled eggs. That's what you're trying to avoid here. Okay, the first thing I do is I add just a little bit of water. Maybe whoops. I guess it'd be more like a tablespoon or a teaspoon, really. I guess it is closer to it. Just to thin out the egg yolks a little bit. Now what I've set up for a double boiler is I've got some water on here simmering. And I'm going to put the bowl into the water. Let you see it there. I'm going to go at it like this. And pretty soon I'm going to build up some steam in there and the eggs will start to cook. Now this is one of the steps of hollandaise where you can have problems, is if you get your fire too hot, you'll notice that the eggs will start sticking to the side and you'll end up having scrambled eggs. As soon as you see that happening, there's several approaches you can do to get away from it. One is to turn down the fire. The approach I like is I pull the bowl off of the fire a little bit and work the eggs. That lets them cool down and let some of that steam escape, and then you don't have the problem. Another you can do, which works real well, is add a little bit more water to the eggs. Thins them out a little bit, and they don't have quite the consistency that makes them want to scramble on you. The important thing when you're doing this is just to keep working the eggs. Get a nice whip. Don't try to do this with a spoon or spatula or anything else. Get a whip and work it. Keep working it around. To me, hollandaise is not a difficult sauce. It's just a lot of work because you got to keep stirring it. Now the other ingredients we're going to have in this is going to be butter, white pepper. You can use cayenne, you can use Tabasco, any kind of pepper. Generally you don't want to use black pepper because it doesn't complement the color of the sauce very well. Lemon juice is probably the biggie, and then we're going to have butter. Now, while I'm doing this, I want to talk about the butter a little bit. I'm melting some butter here. As you can see, it's starting to separate. The foam on the top is the fats and the salt that's in the butter. And what I'm going to do after I get this melted is I'm going to skim that off the top. That's called clarifying the butter. The reason you do that is because the impurities in the butter will break your hollandaise. That's the big threat with hollandaise, is that it's going to separate. The two ways to keep it from separating: one is to make sure you get your egg yolks cooked enough. The second is to make sure that you don't pour a bunch of fat and water into the egg yolks, and to pour very slowly. So once you get these eggs thickened up to their proper consistency, then you're going to very slowly add that butter into the egg yolks. Now, I don't know how well you can see this at home, but the eggs are getting kind of frothy. Now I'm starting to get some scrambling there on the bottom. Okay, that's when I want to pull it off. Just get it off of that stuff and keep mixing it. Don't ever quit stirring, so that I don't end up with any scrambling. See, now the eggs are starting to get a little bit thicker. You can see when I move them from the center, they kind of take a little bit longer to roll to back to the center. That's what you want. I'm going to cook them a little bit more. Now, I've worked in a lot of places over the years, and one of the places I worked was Caesar's Palace. And what we would do there when we made this hollandaise is I'd have a bowl about twice this size, and I'd be standing over what they call a bain-marie, which is a huge pot. Well, not a pot actually, it's more like a huge table filled with hot water. It's about 2 feet of hot water on it. And we'd all stand, there'd be about 3 of us standing over with our bowls in this hot water, just whipping away, just mixing and mixing. And we'd end up making about 5 gallons of hollandaises. Was not uncommon for Caesar's Palace. We finally figured out that if we took a bowl of hot water and placed it underneath a mixing bowl, electric mixer, because they have huge mixers that you can use, and then we set the mixer down into the water and whipped it, you could cook the eggs that way and you didn't have to stand over it. For small batches, this works real well, but if you do happen to have a KitchenAid or one of those types of mixers, they sure work great. You just take a bowl like this, put it underneath the mixing bowl, fill it with hot boiling water, put your egg yolks in there, and whip it up until you get the consistency you want. Okay, we're just about there. As you can see, the egg yolks have now turned to a pale color, and they're stiff now. They aren't runny like they were when we started. So both the color and the consistency change. The most important thing is the consistency. They get stiff. Okay, when you get to that point, you're done with a double boiler. Just kind of set your bowl over here. Now, one of the tricks that you learn is you wet a towel, wring it out a little bit, take your towel and make it into kind of a circle. Put that underneath the bowl. What that does is you don't have to hold the bowl while you whip it because it won't move around on you. Makes it much easier to free up your other hand to pour with. As you can see, the butter's all melted, and you've got this stuff on the top. That's the fat and the salt that's in the butter. And what I'm going to use, for lack of a actual ladle, which is what works best, is this saucepan. Let me just barely skim that off the top. Now, I'm going to throw this away because I don't have any use for it today, but at home, it's where all the flavor in the butter's at as far as sauteing vegetables and things. Like I say, that's where all the salt and the fat's at. We all know that's where all the flavor's at. The unhealthy stuff. But don't worry, this hollandaise is going to be plenty unhealthy enough for you once you get it made. You'll get all your cholesterol here that you ever wanted. Okay, we've got all that out of there. Now I've got the butter clarified a little bit better. Still a few things floating around in there, but not enough to really hurt us. Okay, now here's the tricky part. Very slowly add the butter, just a drizzle. Keep whipping all the time. And blend that butter in there. Put a little bit in there, get it mixed into your eggs. Put a little bit more, mix that into your eggs. Just keep going like that. Okay, now this is 1 pound of butter for 6 egg yolks. Slowly pour that in there. Which I'll tell you what I'll do for you is I'll move over to the center table where you can get a better look at what I'm doing, because this is the critical part of this sauce. Okay, I'm whipping this up. You can see down in there. Slowly adding the butter. It's getting a little thick on me. So what I want to do is add just a little bit of water to it to thin it out. Now when I say a little bit, we're talking very little. It doesn't take much. Just like I guess it would be about a teaspoon, just a few drops. And you'll see that loosen right back up there. When you're making it, it's a lot easier to see what's going on, but you put a little water in there and it really loosens the eggs up. Then go back to adding your butter. Whoops, pour it in there a lot. Now see, what you can see here is this separation here. That's what you don't want. You don't want to see that butter in there. So when you feel like you get a bunch in there, whip it in there real fast. Get it all blended so that you've got it all together. Okay. Also, one thing I ought to mention is when you do add your water to your hollandaise, try to use warm water. You don't want to use cold water because what will happen is it will solidify your butter. Now, hollandaise is a sauce that you've got to use within a few hours because you can't refrigerate it. When you put this in the refrigerator, your butter's going to solidify, it's going to separate from your egg yolks, and you'll probably never get it back together again. I've seen people do it with a food processor or a blender. And there's some tricks, but they're pretty complicated, so best thing is to make it up and get your eggs Benedict or eggs Florentine or whatever you're going to make with it. That's traditionally what the sauce is used for. Okay, now see, it's still a little thick. You really don't want, because you can't, you don't want to have a sauce that's going to glob onto the food. You want something that's going to pour over it. So, but what we're going to add now is some lemon juice. Now I'm going to use my fingers, but you can use a strainer to keep the seeds out. And a thing that works real nice is putting cheesecloth over the lemons. Okay, I'm going to put 1 lemon in here to start with. Okay, I'm going to add just a small dash of Worcestershire. And I like white pepper, so I'm going to use a little bit of white pepper, maybe 1-2 pinches. Mix it all in there. I'm ready to go. I've got hollandaise made. So let's just review that for a second. You want to melt 1 pound of butter. You want to separate 6 egg yolks. Melt your butter down and clarify it by skimming the top of it off. And then you want to take your egg yolks, cook them in a double boiler, whisking them all the time. As soon as you see them start to scramble, pull them off the fire, and then start back to whisking again. Get them to where they've got a good consistency. They're starting to get thick. At various times when you feel like they're getting too thick, you'll be able to feel that because they'll be hard to work with. Add just a little bit of water and whip that in there, and you'll find that they loosen right back up. And then the seasonings are just a dash of Worcestershire, about 1 lemon. A little bit of salt is good, but I use salted butter, so I really didn't have to mess with that. And about a teaspoon of white pepper. Or, like I say, you can use Tabasco sauce a lot of people like, or a lot of people like cayenne pepper. A lot of people also put paprika in the sauce just to give it a color to it, give it a little garnishing effect. That tastes great. That's just right. Okay, now one of the things you can do with a hollandaise is turn it into what they call a béarnaise sauce. All a béarnaise sauce is a hollandaise with a tarragon reduction. A tarragon reduction would be when you would take, let's move this out of the way here. Clean up my spot a little bit. Take a pan like so, put some tarragon in it. This is red wine vinegar. I want to barely cover the tarragon with a red wine vinegar. Okay. This is red wine. I'm going to put just a little bit of red wine. Okay, what I would do is put this on to simmer till it boils just about dry. And then I'm going to want to scoop all that into my hollandaise sauce, mix it in there, and you've got a béarnaise sauce. Also, a lot of people like to use port wine in a béarnaise sauce. That's great, you know, gives it a good flavor. Port wine's a pretty strong wine, has a real distinctive flavor. But I hope I've cleared up any mysteries that you had about hollandaise or any other sauces. Just keep in mind that the important thing is that you have your consistency and your flavorings, and you can make any kind of sauce you want to make. Just stay away from butters to thicken with. You can use cornstarch or you can use a roux, and you're going to be all set. You're going to not have any problem. And keep in mind that when you're adding that roux to the sauce, you want to have it at a simmer. You don't want to have it at a boil, and you don't want to have it not simmering, because the thickening effect that you're looking for isn't going to take place until you actually get a simmer, because that's when you get the glutenizing effect that will thicken up that sauce and make it into a sauce as opposed to just water. I've enjoyed cooking with you, and you have a nice day.
The preceding program was made possible with help from Syntax